Hi everyone, it's Lindsay with High Altitude Astrology, and today is May 7th, 2020. I'm bringing you the chart of the full moon in Scorpio that happened this morning at 4:45 a.m. And this is a powerful full moon. Full moons often are powerful times, and that's because the sun and the moon, which you can see here in the chart, the sun is at 17 degrees of Taurus and the moon at 17 degrees of Scorpio. In any full moon, the sun and the moon are opposing one another. And the sun is shining its light and completely illuminating the moon. Now, the moon in a full moon configuration is the kind of peaking out of the moon cycle. And the moon deals with emotions and feelings and intuitions, the subconscious. And so what happens at a full moon time is you get this kind of peaking out experience where things have been building, and then at the full moon there's often like a revelation of energy, a revelation of things in life, a culmination, a peaking out. Also, you can have sort of endings, especially with a Scorpio moon, because Scorpio energy inherently is about death and transformation. And so with the full moon at the time of Scorpio, the peaking out of the Scorpio energy, it's definitely a time of experiencing endings. And this is going to be perhaps endings of different aspects of life. There could be physical things that happen like separation or some sort of decision, but oftentimes with Scorpio, because it's a emotional energy, it's a water sign, and water signs deal with the feelings, and it's a fixed water sign, so it's very kind of set in the way that it feels. But with this full moon time, there's a balance trying to be struck between the sun in Taurus, which is like shining our light, our individuality out into the world in a way that wants to find material security. It wants to find some sort of expression of self-worth. It wants to feel materially secure, but also it deals with like the things that we want in our life, like our possessions that we like, because Taurus is ruled by Venus, the sign of beauty and pleasure. So there's something about the way that we shine our light out into the world in this Taurian way. Taurus also deals with finances, versus those intense emotional scorpionic feelings. And those are really being highlighted right now. And again, because it's a full moon, it's sort of like a time of change or a time of revealing, a time of seeing maybe where there needs to be some balance found between the things that we want versus the things that we want and we hold on to, again, fixed water, so much that it becomes like a problem. That's why Scorpio rules things like obsession and manipulation and power and control, because that process of death and transformation can bring up a lot of fears. And so we can tend to kind of hold on and not want to let go at a time at the full moon when really it's about doing just the opposite. And another thing that Scorpio relates to inherently is what you would call the shadow. And the shadow has to do with a lot of the emotional energy that we might shove down, or aspects of ourselves that we might have not felt were good or worthy or right, because maybe they were criticized as we were growing up. And so there's a lot of like stuff going on down underneath the surface, churning in these emotional Scorpio waters that the full moon shines its light on. And we have an opportunity to see what that might be. And one thing that is said about the shadow is that not only is it our sort of darkness, like kind of your negative aspects, but there can also be gifts in there that we have suppressed and pushed down. So it's a time of really making space for ourselves to process the emotional turmoil that might be being revealed at this full moon time. And really, like I said, giving ourselves the space to process emotion and feeling, not to judge, but to just witness and experience and feel and allow and release, because ultimately that stuff is what kind of controls us. And if it's not really positive, and if it's not really sort of keeping us on a healthy path, then we want to process that. We want the death and rebirth of that emotional energy so that we can kind of be free of it and no longer need to be so controlled or possessed by it. So that's some of the Scorpio full moon energy. It's not necessarily always negative or dark. This could be a time where Scorpio does rule our passions and our desires, and it could be a time where we're really sort of recognizing like what it is we are really passionate about, or what it is we really feel, or what it is that we really desire. But again, with that Scorpio full moon, meaning the sun opposing the moon, there's something there that is needing to find balance. And again, it may have to do with some of these sun and Taurus ways of wanting to kind of like keep things around it for pleasure, and because it's the way you always have it or always do it. But really the Scorpio moon is kind of saying, let's look very deeply at what's going on here and get very honest and truthful about how we actually feel, moon in Scorpio. Because the moon of Scorpio knows what it likes and knows what it doesn't like. So this is very much a time of getting in touch with that as well. Now, so there's some interesting aspects going on to the new moon, to the full moon at this time that I want to bring up. And one is that you've got the sun right next to Mercury with the 3-degree orb. Mercury's in Taurus. So Mercury is the thinking function. And Mercury is how we communicate, what we communicate. And so there's something about this full moon time where the way we shine our light and express our individuality is working with the way we communicate and think in the sign of Taurus, in the sign of self-worth, in the sign of value, what we value, in the sign of finances and money and possessions and the material resources available to us. So the mind and the individuality are working together to be able to communicate what it is we do truly value. Now again, Taurus is also a fixed energy, just like Scorpio. So sometimes Taurus can kind of hold on as well, and that's again because it's the comfort, it's the pleasure, it's what makes us feel secure and safe. So there could be kind of thoughts that are being brought up at this time that have to go through some sort of regeneration, where maybe we're having to see how those pleasures that we've sought, or just even the thoughts that we've been having that we kind of hold on to because they're what we know, have to go through some sort of emotional transformation and a letting go, in a sense, in order for us to really get on a new path that is more in alignment with and with what is in alignment with our self-worth. All right, some other things that are happening at this full moon time is that the moon is trining Neptune. You can see here Neptune at 20 degrees of Pisces, and the moon's at 17, so again about a 3-degree orb between these two energies. And that's just a support. Neptune has to do with spiritual perspective, compassion, being being willing. It also too has to do with letting go uh, in an emotional way, Pisces, and endings. It also has to do with, again, having this compassionate kind of universal mind where we can sort of accept. That's how the endings weaves into Pisces, is there's like an acceptance, sort of a resignation, an allowing type of energy. So there's something here with Neptune and the moon in Scorpio that's helping us, helping those intense feelings that the Scorpio moon, full moon might be bringing up, that is blending though with that universal mind energy, that oneness energy, that ability to have compassion, have empathy, have sympathy, and really transcend. I mean, that's a lot about what Neptune represents, is that ability to transcend the ego and to allow for an acceptance of what is. So that's a nice combination that you see at this full moon time. Another combination that is happening is that the moon is sextiling Pluto here at 24 degrees. And this is interesting because Pluto rules the sign of Scorpio, and now the two are making a connection here, the moon and Pluto at this full moon time. And Pluto ruling Scorpio does deal with the energy of death and transformation, the energy of really, going through that process. So there's something very supportive between the moon and Pluto, and there's an opportunity. This is what the sextile signifies, that if we really do allow ourselves to face the truth of things, to look deeply at ourselves, to look at our emotions and at our feelings, and really allow ourselves to be honest with them, that we can invite this process of death and transformation. And then actually what happens is that we become empowered, because we're no longer being controlled by those energies or those feelings or those emotions or those experiences. So this is very powerful to have Pluto in alignment with this moon in Scorpio at this time, because Pluto in Capricorn is about doing the work to transform. I mean, Capricorn is the energy of the goat climbing the rocky slope and, wanting to make it to the top because it has to. So this is, transformation taken very seriously, transformation that we embrace and we work at and we do. So this is a support from Pluto. If we're, and Scorpio is used to this kind of looking very deeply and going through the transformative process. So this is a very helpful energy at this time of the new moon, of the full moon. A couple of other things going on. We've just had the North Node move from Cancer to Gemini, and this is a kind of a collective karma energy. So for the next year and a half, the North Node is going to be in Gemini. So it's moved from Cancer into Gemini. And that means that the South Node is also in Sagittarius. And Sagittarius is about thinking big. It's about philosophies and larger perspectives. Whereas Gemini is about facts and fact-finding, gathering information. It very much has to do with logic, and it has to do with thinking and then making a decision. So the fact that the North Node has just moved into Gemini, it was just like a day ago, 2.5 days ago, means that at this full moon time, we're moving into this new collective karmic way of where we're all headed. And it has to do with our mind, and it has to do with logic and being rational. So the Sagittarian perspective wants this really big, like, possibilities and hope and, belief. Gemini is like, okay, here's this information, here's this information, here's this information. Okay, now I got it. I'm going this direction. Because that's what brings, you hear Gemini being kind of flighty or changeable or dualistic, but it really has to do with a connection to the man's connection between spirit and earth, or the higher mind in a sense and the lower mind. And so Gemini is that conduit, and it's the information that we're getting constantly that is helping us to make choices. And really, at its most elevated expression, it is logical and it is rational and it is reasonable. So for the next year and a half, we're going to be moving more into that kind of way of relating to each other, as opposed to like the dream. That's more Pisces, but it's like, as opposed to like the really expanded possibility perspective, or even like a philosophical perspective. You know, sometimes these days I'm like listening to people I've listened to online, and maybe you feel this way about me, I don't know, but it's like sometimes I'm like, I don't think I agree with that, you know, like all of a sudden their perspective is coming into my perspective, and there's sort of like a cognitive dissonance where I'm like, I don't believe that, you know, I don't think that way. So it's just an example of sort of how we're moving away from like these huge kind of belief systems, and we're moving more into information gathering, fact finding, making decisions based on logic and reason. And that's helpful at this full moon time, because we could be feeling so much emotion, you know, but it's like, what is the reality? What are the facts? You know, what information are we receiving that can help us make the right choices? Not based on what we hope might be, or what we believe might be, or what we think the possibility that could be. It's about what is and the facts. Okay, the other thing that's happening is that Venus is now stationed, and it's getting ready to go retrograde in the sign of Gemini here. And it is squaring Pisces at 20 degrees of, squaring Neptune at 20 degrees of Pisces. So this is significant at this full moon time, because Venus is basically slowed down to a stop and is getting ready to go backward from the way it looks to us in the sky. And this is going to be happening for another month and a half, I believe. It goes direct on June 25th. Yes. So Venus is getting ready to go retrograde, which is going to happen on May 13th, in just about a week. But today, Venus is stationed, which means she's slowing down to a stop and getting ready to turn. And in this station process, she is squared to Neptune. And Venus is about our loving energy. It's about our creative energy. It's about our money, our finances. It's about self-worth, what we value. It's a big relationship energy. And what's happening is, as it's slowing down and stationing and squaring Neptune, it is going to be challenging our thinking, because it's in Gemini, around relationships. And as it's squaring Neptune in Pisces, Neptune is about the dream and the idealization of things and wanting the perfection of things, almost like the unattainable. So Neptune's going to be kind of clouding as Venus is going retrograde, asking us to review our relationships, our finances, our values, our worth. And Neptune's going to kind of be there, just sort of like creating a cloud or a fog, you know, and it's going to be asking that we really not get confused easily, because again, Mercury wants the facts, wants information. So Venus is going to be really kind of going back through this retrograde process and wanting to really look at things from a factual place, while Neptune is kind of, you know, spritzing the fog like you're in a dance, a disco, you know, kind of like, it's all good, you know, just keep dancing, you know. And it's like, okay, you know, when the blinders finally come off at the end of this retrograde, because Neptune's going to square it 3 times, or Venus is going to square Neptune 3 times, we're really going to have a clearer understanding of, you know, where things do stand in relationships with people, and also, you know, where we maybe have been sort of reaching for pie in the sky around certain financial ventures or, um, those kinds of Venus things. But right now at this full moon time, it's significant because Venus is just slowing down to a stop and creating that square. So it's saying there's something at this full moon time where we are being asked to kind of wake up from the dream, wake up from the dream and not allow kind of ourselves to really live in any delusionary state, especially around relationships, because there's just a lot of symbols in this full moon chart around relationships. The fact that the sun is in Taurus and the moon is in Scorpio and Venus is slowing down to its retrograde degree, with Venus squaring it. One really cool thing about this Venus squared Neptune energy is that it's very good for creativity, because Neptune is allowing us to tune into the subtle realms of imagination, music, poetry, just creative expression, and Venus being beauty and harmony and expressing beauty. This combination is a wonderful suggestion for us to get involved, and it's a wonderful way to creatively channel some of this Scorpio energy, because one of the things about Scorpio is that once we've gone through the transformation, we have all this energy available to empower us to head in new directions and really to put our drive and energy into things, because Scorpio is ruled by Pluto and by Mars, and these are two very strong, driven energies. So this helpful for allowing us to channel this longing. That's what Venus squared Neptune is. It's a longing, but it's ultimately it's a longing for the divine. It's a longing for a connection to the divine. That's why things like meditation or prayer, however you connect spiritually, can be very helpful at this time too, because it gets us out of our ego, which can be very scorpionic, and brings us into more of a transcendent energy where we are no longer sort of operating from that smaller ego space. We have a connection to something larger than ourselves. And that's really what the Venus-Neptune energy is all about. So this full moon time, great time to really focus our energy into spiritual pursuits or into creative pursuits that get us out of that sort of more egocentric place. All right, I want to read a couple of things about Scorpio. This is from an article called The 3 Phases of Scorpio Totem by Karthik Kashyap. And he's a Scorpio. And this is what he writes. He says, Scorpios, well, let's just say, I want to jump to just sort of the points. He talks about that there are 3 sort of phases. One is the deadly stinger, where the scorpion is the basic and the least evolved. And this is the symbol of the Scorpio. Much like an insect, you will find a Scorpio in this stage ruled by emotions and instincts rather than intellect. And Scorpios in this level have low self-awareness and low self-control. And, that's a lot of what Scorpio transformation is about, is learning how to control those baser drives, whether it's manipulation, whether it's wanting to control others, whether it's obsessing, learning, becoming aware of that and working with it in order to not let it control you. Then it moves on to the eagle, flying high in the sky. And this is the second totem of Scorpio, where one is self-aware of his or her powers. Once a Scorpio has developed sufficient self-awareness and is not ruled by intellect, and is ruled by intellect rather than the instincts and emotions, he or she can choose to use these traits as wanted. And in this stage, most of the Scorpios try to achieve great heights in their career and endeavors. This doesn't mean they don't have a stinger, but the way a Scorpio defeats his enemy here is different. A Scorpio here is not self-destructive. As a normal eagle would do, a Scorpio would swoop down on his prey, defeat it, and fly back in the air, not looking for complete destruction of the enemy. but he does warn that this level can still be manipulative and exploitive. And finally, he talks about the phoenix and the dove, the symbol of peace. And he says, this is a totem where the true power of Scorpio is shown to the world. This is the totem where a Scorpio becomes aware of his or her mystical powers of healing. While most people consider a Scorpio to be a venomous creature, the true power of a Scorpio lies in healing and spreading peace. That is the ultimate way of exerting one's power. This is the reason this totem is symbolized by a dove. He warns it's not easy. A Scorpio needs to go through a complete transformation to achieve this power. This transformation is symbolized by the phoenix, which burns and rises from his own ashes. All right, so something to consider at this full moon in Scorpio time about how we can choose to use our energy or not. I also wanted to read the degree of the full moon. It's at 17 degrees. And this is from The Inside Degrees by Ilias Lonsdale. And here's what he says about the 17 degree. And you can see here the moon is at 17 degrees, the full moon of Scorpio. Scorpio at 17 degrees, the mountain abode of a hermit, a stronghold for secrets, hidden purposes, and inward streams to thrive and prevail. You live several lives in one, harboring the brightest, the darkest, the strangest, and the most wondrous worlds. Accustomed to the shadows and to meditation, prayer, and extraordinary discipline. Remaining in here forever. Absolutely uninvolved with surface affairs. I'm going to read that again. Absolutely uninvolved with surface affairs. No outer life whatsoever, but inwardly deep, intense, and overwhelmingly driven. Following through on ancient vows, a grim, heavy, somber tone, the capacity for root transformation and extraordinary realization. Your central focus is to be with God in the silence steadfastly, and there is nothing else that comes even close to the feeling all the way through, on and true. Wow, that's powerful. Now again, this is just the degree of the full moon today, but it is suggesting, what this type of energy requires, what this degree of the Scorpio energy requires. That there really is a need to go in and to shine the light inside and to look at what you see and look at what you find. And it's also talking about that need to be transcendent. It says your central focus is to be with God in the silence steadfastly, and there is nothing else that comes even close to feeling all the way through, on and true. All right, and then finally I wanted to share from the Thoth deck a card that I pulled just before I started this video, and it's perfect. It's called Self-Preservation. And I think it really speaks to the way we can approach this full moon time, because it is about turning inward, looking at the self, and not being distracted by the outside. And this is what is written about self-preservation with this particular deck. Integrity. Withdraw into the self in order to preserve one's position. A timeless wisdom aspect of eternity. Integrity. Withdraw into the self in order to preserve one's position. So there's something about being able to harness your own energy by turning inward and focusing on self-preservation in order to preserve your position that is required at this time. Position, I would translate that into like just really preserving yourself, because what can happen is we can get so caught up in the outside and so caught up in these projections into the story outside of us, and then that's where our energy goes, and that's where our focus goes, and then we're just sort of caught up in the story, you know, and we're not turning that light, that full moon light, back on ourselves, and really having a good look at ourselves and allowing for this transformative process to happen. It happens when we turn in. It happens when we go in. It happens when we allow ourselves to be with ourselves, to feel, to experience. And that's what brings integrity. Because when you continue to do the other ways, you know, of being, that lower scorpionic way, you are entangling yourself. You know, you're keeping yourself entangled in these lower vibrations, basically, and you're not allowing yourself to be freed. You're not allowing yourself to rise up and to become more empowered and to have more integrity. Okay, that's the Scorpio full moon video for you all. I hope you enjoyed it. If you do like my channel, please subscribe. I'd appreciate it so much. And I will see you at the next video. Take care.